a chance encounter, a simple act of kindness, and a secret that could change everything. When Jack Walker, a humble mechanic in the quiet little town of Silver Ridge, pulls over to help a woman with car trouble on the side of the road, he thinks it's just another day. But he has no idea that the woman standing in front of him is none other than Amelia Grant, the hidden heiress of one of the country's biggest tech and automotive empires. Jack isn't interested in fame or fortune. He fixes what's broken, works hard, and lives a simple life. But Amelia isn't just looking for a mechanic. She's looking for something money can't buy: honesty, integrity, a heart that can't be bought. Will Jack's small act of kindness lead to something much bigger? Will Amelia risk everything to follow her heart? This is a story about trust, identity, and the kind of love money just can't measure. So grab your headphones, turn up the volume, and get ready for an unforgettable journey. Because sometimes, the richest hearts are found in the most unexpected places. If you love heartwarming, emotional love stories with twists, transformations, and unforgettable characters, make sure you subscribe to the channel right now. Now, let's begin. The late afternoon sun cast its golden glow over the hills of Silver Ridge, a tiny town where time seemed to move a little slower. It was the kind of place where store windows still had bells, and everyone knew the grocery store owner by name. At the end of Main Street, surrounded by pickup trucks and rusted bikes, stood the Walker Auto Care garage. Jack Walker, 31, was covered in grease up to his elbows, deep into another routine repair. He was the kind of guy who didn't talk much, worked hard, and never asked for anything in return. He took care of his sick mother, helped the neighbors whenever he could, and rarely left town. It was just another day like any other. Until it wasn't. The roar of a dying engine echoed from outside. Jack looked up to see a sleek black SUV, modern, shiny, and totally out of place in Silver Ridge. Pulling over to the side of the road, smoke pouring from under the hood. The door opened with a click, and a woman stepped out with purpose in her stride, her heels sinking slightly into the dry dirt. She wore a beige silk blouse and expensive sunglasses. Her brown hair was tied in a high bun, her expression somewhere between frustration and exhaustion. Jack grabbed a rag, wiped his hands, and calmly approached. "Engine trouble?" he asked, already eyeing the situation. The woman slowly took off her sunglasses. Her eyes were a striking blue, and though clearly uncomfortable, there was something sincere in her look. "Seems like it. Everything was fine until it suddenly started smoking." Jack nodded. "You're lucky. If that had happened 2 miles back, you'd be stuck in the middle of nowhere without cell signal. This is Silver Ridge. We've got a garage." He pointed back with his thumb. She hesitated, like she was weighing her options, but eventually followed him. When they got to the garage, Jack asked her to wait in the small office while he popped the hood. Under the hood, a surprise. The radiator had blown, and the belt was about to snap. Nothing unfixable, but it'd take some time. "Radiator's shot," Jack muttered. "I'm gonna need at least a couple hours." She sighed, clearly irritated, but not at him. "I had an important meeting. But maybe this was for the best." Jack raised an eyebrow but didn't ask anything else. He wasn't the nosy type. "There's old coffee in the break room. Cold water, too. You can wait in there if you want." She looked at him, surprised. "You're not gonna charge me first?" Jack gave a half smile. "We'll talk about that later." She let out a soft laugh, the first since she'd arrived. Jack went back to work, but his mind had already started to wander. Who was this woman, really? He had no idea, but Amelia Grant was about to turn his entire life upside down. The shop clock read 5:42 p.m. when Jack dove back under the hood of the Vesper. The heat of the day was finally fading, but the engine was still hot, letting off stubborn little puffs of steam that made his eyes sting. He'd seen this kind of problem before. A part installed wrong, a car pushed too hard, maybe just a lazy job by the last mechanic. Or maybe the car was just another symbol of someone too busy to care about maintenance. Inside the small, stuffy office, Amelia sat with her back straight, trying to maintain her usual poise. But it was hard to look composed when you were sitting in a plastic chair, surrounded by faded posters of classic cars and the thick smell of oil and rubber. She looked out the window. Jack was crouched down, focused, his face serious, his hands steady. The way he moved, it wasn't sloppy or rushed. He moved like someone who respected what he did. And that right there, caught her attention more than any impressive resume she'd ever read. The truth was, Amelia wasn't just passing through. Not exactly. She had walked out of a meeting in Denver, yet another boardroom filled with suited men trying to convince her to approve a merger that betrayed everything her father had built. She was the CEO now, handed a company everyone thought was too big for her. They smiled with their teeth, but never with their eyes, told her she needed someone more experienced by her side. She'd listened, taken a breath, and driven off. Today, she had driven too far, and broke down in the middle of nowhere. Irony, maybe, or providence. Outside, Jack had already removed the busted part and was making his way toward the replacement shelf. While scanning for the right model, he cast a quick glance toward the office window. The woman was still there, watching. Not with impatience, but with something closer to curiosity. "Here we go," he murmured, grabbing one of the last compatible parts. "Good time to give this car a second chance." 15 minutes later, Amelia appeared at the garage door with a small bottle of water in her hands. "Making any progress?" she asked, a shy smile playing on her lips. Jack looked up. "Checking if I made a run for it with your car?" She laughed softly. "Maybe just a little." He wiped his hands on a rag and leaned against the car. "It's gonna take a bit longer. That part was hanging on by a thread. Lucky for you, the water pump's still alive. I can wait. Not in such a hurry anymore." She looked around. "Silver Ridge, right? Never heard of it. Most people haven't, and the ones who have usually don't come back. So why'd you stay?" Jack paused for a second, then shrugged. "'Cause there's value in being somewhere people remember your name, where helping someone still means something." Amelia stayed quiet. That hit deeper than she wanted to admit. "And you?" he asked suddenly. "Where you headed?" She hesitated. The truth was, she didn't know. "Trying to figure that out," she said simply. Jack nodded like he understood. The chirp of a cricket filled the silence that followed. "Well," he said, turning back to the engine, "if you're gonna figure something out, Silver Ridge ain't a bad place to start." Amelia gave a small, lopsided smile. For the first time in a long time, she felt seen. And Jack? He had no idea that the woman standing in front of him wasn't just some lost driver. She was Amelia Grant, daughter of Richard Grant, founder of Grant Motors, the very name etched onto the most expensive toolbox in his garage. But that, he'd only find out later. The sky was starting to darken by the time Jack finished installing the new part. The Vesper's engine purred softly, like a cat just waking up. It was the kind of sound any true car lover would recognize as music. Amelia watched from a distance, leaning against the shop doorway, arms crossed, no longer wearing her sunglasses. Her once neat bun had loosened, a few strands escaping and framing her face. The weak AC in the office hadn't stood a chance against the heat, and she had long since given up trying to look perfectly put together. "All set?" she asked, walking over slowly. Jack nodded, closing the hood with a firm thud. "Yep. Took it for a test rev. It'll hold up better than most of the cars around here, actually." "Impressive." She looked at the car, then back at him. "You make it look easy." Jack shrugged. "It's not hard when you do it every day. Just takes paying attention. A lot of folks forget that part." She looked at him for a beat, then reached into her bag and pulled out a slim leather wallet. From it, she took a shiny black card and a few neatly folded bills. "How much do I owe you?" Jack glanced at the money, then at her. He wiped his hands on a rag, then crossed his arms. "Nothing." "What do you mean, nothing?" "You had car trouble. I helped. That's what we do around here." She frowned. "Jack, right? This wasn't a small favor. You swapped out a part, diagnosed the issue, kept me from breaking down in the middle of nowhere. I can pay, and trust me, I can pay well." He smiled, easy and calm. "I know you can. But that's not why I did it." "Then why?" Jack looked up at the sky, where the orange glow was giving way to deep blue. "Because sometimes you help someone and don't expect anything back. It's rare, sure, but it still exists." Amelia slowly tucked the money back into her wallet. No one ever turned down payment from her. No one ever turned down anything from her. At least, not in the world she came from. "You're weird," she said with a slight grin. "You're too polite to call someone crazy," he replied, amused. She laughed, for real this time. A soft, unexpected sound. "Have you always been like this?" Jack thought for a moment. "Pretty much. Grew up here. This town teaches you to get by, and to remember who's standing next to you." Amelia lowered her gaze. "I don't know if I even know people like that anymore." Jack was quiet for a second. "Sometimes you've got to break down on the side of the road to find your way back." She looked up slowly, caught off guard by how deep that landed. It didn't sound like something a simple mechanic would say. It sounded like it came from someone who had seen the world fall apart and find a way to fix it. "Thank you, Jack." Her voice was softer now. "Really?" He just nodded, grabbing his tools to put them away. She hesitated for a moment before opening her car door. But before she got in, she turned back toward him. "You never asked my name." Jack wiped grease off his forehead with his forearm and looked at her. "Figured if you wanted to tell me, you would." A comfortable silence settled between them. "Amelia," she said at last. "Just Amelia." Jack gave her a faint smile. "Nice to meet you." "Just Amelia?" She got into the car, started the engine, now running smooth and steady, and backed up slowly. But before pulling away for good, she lowered the window. "Maybe I'll come back someday." Jack tilted his head, wearing that easy half grin. "Maybe I'll still be here." And then she was gone. But something about her stayed, and something in him shifted. 2 days had passed since Amelia disappeared down the dusty road out of Silver Ridge, leaving behind nothing but the scent of exhaust and a strange feeling Jack couldn't quite shake. Life at the shop went on as usual. An oil change here, brake pads there, jokes traded with the parts delivery guy. Everything in its place, everything as always. But something had changed. He couldn't get her out of his mind. And it wasn't just because she was beautiful, though, yes, she absolutely was. It was her eyes. The way she took in everything around her, like she was quietly cataloging the world. And the silence. A silence that said more than hours of conversation ever could. She seemed like a woman, carrying an invisible weight. That Friday morning, Jack was tightening the belt on an old Chevy when his buddy and loyal customer Carl showed up at the shop with a to-go cup of coffee and his usual running mouth. "You're on another planet today, Jack." Almost tightened that belt with the wrong wrench. "Just tired," Jack muttered, not giving him much to work with. Carl leaned against a stack of tires. "It was that woman, wasn't it? The one with the fancy SUV that rolled in here the other day?" Jack raised an eyebrow. "How the hell do you know about that? Small town, remember? She stopped at the market before she came here. Folks said she looked like one of those big-shot New York execs. Didn't say much, just bought a bottle of water and didn't make eye contact with a soul. But sounds like she looked at you." Jack let out a short laugh. "You people love making up stories." "I'm not making up a damn thing. I'm just saying, when someone from out of town gets under the skin of a guy as quiet as you, might be worth paying attention." Jack finished the adjustment and slammed the hood shut. She just needed help. Wasn't a big deal, but even he knew he was lying to himself. That night, Jack found himself on the old shop couch, beer in hand, soft blues playing from the dusty radio in the corner. It was his usual end-of-day ritual, but the peace he usually found in it didn't show up. Instead, he kept glancing toward the front gate, wondering, without ever saying it, if she might come back. And somewhere far away, Amelia wasn't sleeping either. She was back in her high-rise apartment in Denver, surrounded by glass and steel, with the whole city sprawled out beneath her feet. But none of those glittering lights seemed to spark what she felt in Silver Ridge. She was thinking about Jack, about how he treated her, how he didn't flinch at her looks or bow to her status, how he refused her money like someone who lived by values, not price tags. He had no idea who she was. And for one rare, precious moment, she'd forgotten too. She looked at the black card still tucked in her purse, the same one she'd tried to hand him, the one he wouldn't take. She left it there, for now. The next morning, Jack was sweeping the shop entrance when he heard it again, the low, unmistakable rumble of an expensive, well-tuned engine. He turned around, and his heart skipped a beat, even if he pretended it didn't. The black Vesper pulled up in front of the shop. No smoke, no stutters. It was running perfectly. Amelia Grant had come back. Jack froze for a second, the broom still in his hand, forgotten. The black Vesper gleamed under the soft morning light, not a single sign of malfunction. And then, the door opened. Amelia stepped out, her walk lighter than before. No heels this time. She wore dark jeans and a leather jacket over a plain t-shirt. Her hair was loose, dancing in the soft breeze. The woman standing in front of him now looked less like a CEO and more like someone trying to remember who she was before all of it. "Your car's running," Jack said, arms crossed, that cautious half-smile tugging at his lips. "Break down again, or just miss the shop's terrible coffee?" Amelia smiled, raising her brows. "Honestly, a little of both." Jack let out a quiet chuckle. "And here I thought my coffee was the real secret to my success around here." "Maybe it is," she said, walking slowly toward the shop door, taking in the space. "This place has something comforting, like time moves slower here." "It does," he replied. "Out here, we choose what's worth running after." She leaned back against the wall, arms crossed. "And you? Why don't you run so much?" Jack wiped his hands on a rag and stepped a little closer, stopping just a few steps from her. "'Cause running always felt like a fast way to get lost. And I've already lost myself enough trying to be who other people wanted." Amelia bit her lower lip. His words hit deeper than she expected. There was something in his eyes, a quiet honesty, that made her want to let her guard down too. Something that made being real feel safe. "I didn't come back because of the car," she said suddenly, almost a whisper. Jack didn't respond right away. He just nodded, slowly. "I figured. I don't usually do this," she continued. "Come back to places, especially not for people. But something brought you here," he finished for her. She nodded. The silence that followed wasn't uncomfortable. It was thick, full, almost intimate. "Want to come inside for some terrible coffee?" Jack broke the tension with a crooked grin. She laughed. "As long as it comes with a little more truth, I'm in." A few minutes later, they were sitting on the two low stools inside the shop, paper cups in hand. The radio played some old, mellow country tune. Jack leaned back, boots crossed out in front of him. Amelia sat upright, but her shoulders weren't nearly as tense as before. "So," he asked casually, "what do you do, Amelia? I mean, really?" She hesitated. Jack noticed. "You don't have to answer if you don't want. I just figured you came back." She looked at him. There was a visible battle going on inside her. Part of her wanted to keep the mystery. The other part, maybe just wanted to be seen for once as something more than a title. "I work with cars," she said, offering a half-smile. It was true, just not the whole truth. "The irony's pretty great," Jack said. "A blazer-wearing executive rolls into my garage in a car only 3 mechanics in the state know how to fix, and says she works with cars." She laughed, leaning her head against the wall. "Okay, maybe I left out a few details. I like people who don't say everything at once," he replied. "Makes me want to listen more." Amelia looked at him for a moment, surprised by how steady he was, how easy he was to be around. And there, sitting beside a quiet mechanic in a forgotten corner of the world, she felt like maybe, just maybe, she was exactly where she needed to be. Time moved slowly that morning, like the universe had decided to cut them both some slack. The town was quiet, the only sounds being a delivery truck rumbling somewhere in the distance and the soft whistle of the wind weaving through the trees. Jack and Amelia were still at the shop, now sitting out back on a small weathered wooden deck that overlooked an open field. It was the kind of place where you could watch the sunset without a single building getting in the way, where the sky looked bigger than anywhere else. "So, why cars?" Jack asked, breaking the silence as he turned his paper cup slowly between his fingers. "Was it something romantic? Or just opportunity?" Amelia looked out at the horizon, thoughtful. "My dad. He built the company from scratch, started selling used parts out of a garage. I grew up on stories about engines, gears, and the smell of burnt rubber. When I was 7, he let me take apart an entire Beetle engine, just to teach me about patience." Jack smiled. "Sounds like the kind of dad I would have liked to meet." She nodded slowly. "He was intense, but he taught from the heart. After he died, the company became something else. It grew too fast, too big. It turned into a machine, and I became part of it." And now you're trying to remember what it's like to just be Amelia. She turned to him, a little surprised. That's exactly it. Jack took a sip of his coffee and looked out over the field. Funny. I've never been beyond here. Silver Ridge is all I know. And still, it feels like you're the one trying to find home. Amelia sat in silence for a few seconds. I have everything money can buy. But sometimes it feels like I don't have anything that really matters. Jack turned to her. Now that's something most people take a whole lifetime to figure out. You're ahead of the curve. Maybe, but I still don't know what to do with it. Jack leaned back against the wall behind him and took a deep breath. You know what I think, he said, not really waiting for an answer. I think you're not here by accident. Some people cross our path because they need help. And some show up because we need them too. Amelia looked at him, studying his face. And you? You think you need me? He smiled, but didn't answer right away. I think I'm still trying to figure out what it is you came here to fix. They both laughed, but there was a subtle tension in the air, a growing curiosity, a desire to say more, and a fear of saying the wrong thing and ruining everything. Amelia's phone buzzed. She looked at the screen, and her expression changed. It was a video call from Charles Bennett, the vice chairman of Grant Motors Board. The kind of call you didn't ignore. She declined it. Jack noticed. Work? Always is, she replied, slipping the phone into her jacket pocket. You're gonna have to go back to that life at some point, right? She sighed. Yeah, but not today. Jack nodded. Fair enough. Today you can just be someone who likes bad coffee and good conversation. She smiled sincerely. And you can be someone who understands people more than you let on. Yeah, but let's keep that between us, he joked. I don't need customers thinking I've turned into a therapist. The two laughed again, and for a moment, the Silver Ridge garage became a place where time and status didn't exist. Just two people trying to find each other, maybe even trying to find themselves a little too. Amelia stayed in Silver Ridge longer than she'd planned. At first, it was only supposed to be a few hours. Then it became the whole day. And now, with the sky once again painted in gold, she was still there, as if the place had a magnet tied to her soul. Jack, on the other hand, carried on with the same calm ease as always. He didn't ask intrusive questions. He didn't push. It was like he instinctively knew that if he just gave the silence enough space, she'd say what she needed to. And he was right. As they watched the sunset from the small back porch behind the garage, Amelia turned to him with a different look in her eyes. It wasn't just curiosity anymore. It was something steadier. A decision. Jack, have you ever thought about leaving here? He looked at her, frowning slightly. Like, moving out of town? She nodded. Maybe changing your life. Jack took a deep breath. Like her question had pulled him out of Silver Ridge's quiet bubble. I thought about it. Mostly back when my dad was still around. He used to say I should go do something big, study engineering, open my own shop. But after he passed, my mom got sick, and I stayed. Amelia lowered her eyes, touched by the simplicity of his answer. He hadn't stayed out of fear. He'd stayed out of love. And that was something few people ever understood. And now? She asked. Do you still think about it? Jack looked out over the field, thought about everything he'd built with his own hands, every customer he'd helped, every car he'd brought back to life. And then he thought of her, sitting there beside him, from a world so far from his, yet fitting perfectly into that moment, like she'd always belonged. I don't know, he answered honestly. I guess it would depend on the reason. She hesitated, thought about how to approach it. She didn't want to scare him off, didn't want to say too much too fast, but something deep inside told her he was different, that she could trust him. I'm rebuilding a part of my dad's company, she began. Something more personal, off the radar. Jack turned to her, listening closely. And you want help with that? She smiled. I want real people. Someone who knows cars, sure. But more than that, someone who understands people. Someone with values. Someone who won't just say yes because I'm the boss. Jack chuckled softly. Well, you've already seen how good I am at that. I even turned down your money. Exactly why I'm here, she said, steady and sure. A silence settled between them. Not uncomfortable, but full of possibilities. "I'm not offering you a job," she said after a moment. "At least, not yet. I just want you to think about the idea of something bigger, something that's yours, maybe even ours." Jack looked at her for a few seconds, then glanced away toward the darkening sky. "And what if I'm not the kind of guy who plays well with rules?" "Good," she said with a grin. "Because the ones I know never really worked anyway." He laughed quietly. "You do know this is all kind of crazy, right?" "I do. But sometimes it's in the crazy that we find the truth." Jack went quiet again. This woman, who showed up with a busted car and way too many secrets, was now talking about building something together. He didn't know if it was a business proposal or something deeper. Maybe both. And even though he didn't answer her then, deep down, something in him had already started to say yes. Saturday morning arrived with a light mist covering the hills of Silver Ridge. The scent of wet grass filled the air, and the town stirred slowly in its usual familiar rhythm. But inside Jack Walker's garage, something was different. The black Vesper was gone. Amelia had left before sunrise. Jack woke up to the sound of the engine fading away. He looked out the window of the small room behind the garage, but all he saw was a cloud of dust on the road. No note, no message, just silence. But on the counter in the garage, right where they'd had coffee the day before, there was an envelope. It was black, elegant, no name. Inside, there was only a card with fine embossed letters. Amelia Grant, Chief Executive Officer, Grant Motors. Jack stared at the card for a long time. That was the moment it all sank in, sudden, quiet, and unmistakable. She wasn't just someone who worked with cars. She was the cars. Grant Motors was a giant, one of the biggest automotive companies in the country. And she was the heir, the CEO. A woman who had more power, money, and reach than anyone in Silver Ridge could probably even imagine. He leaned against the workbench, the card still in his hand. Jack didn't know if he was shocked, or if, deep down, he had already known. There had been clues: the car, the way she spoke, the phone that never rang in front of him but was always buzzing. That look in her eyes, like every decision she made, was bigger than where to go after the repair. But now it was confirmed. She was from another world. And yet, he couldn't forget the way she laughed, the way she really listened, like she wanted to be there, even though she could have been anywhere else in the world. Jack placed the card in the drawer of his toolbox, and there it stayed. But the thought of her, that wouldn't leave his mind. Meanwhile, in Denver, Amelia was back to her routine, or at least trying to fit herself back into it. Meetings had started before 9 a.m. Her assistant was waiting with a folder full of reports and spreadsheets. The board wanted updates, the media wanted statements, and she wanted silence. But there was no silence in her world. Inside the mirrored elevator carrying her to the 42nd floor of Grant Motors HQ, she caught a glimpse of herself. Hair perfectly pinned, blazer fitted, heels sharp. Everything in place. Everything as it should be. So why did everything feel off? She closed her eyes for a moment, and Jack's face flashed in her mind. That crooked smile, the calm in his eyes, the calloused hands that moved with such gentleness, and the way he saw her, not as an executive, not as a billionaire, but as someone who just needed a minute of peace. She exhaled. That night, sitting alone in her high-rise penthouse, she kicked off her heels, let down her hair, and opened her laptop. One tab was already open, the new division she was planning to launch, and next to it, a blank space waiting for the team she hadn't finished building. She clicked on Add Name and, without thinking too much, typed Jack Walker. Suggested position, independent consultant, trusted technical specialist. She didn't hit send. Not yet, but the idea was there, real, alive, and she knew if she truly wanted to build something with purpose, something that would honor her father's legacy, she couldn't do it alone. She needed someone who was everything her world wasn't. And Jack was exactly that. 12 days. That's how long Amelia managed to stay in Denver without going back to Silver Ridge in her mind. 12 days of meetings with shareholders, quarterly performance reports, and calls with investors in Asia. Everything that should have filled her head, but didn't. In every quiet moment, Jack returned, with his honest voice. That look that wasn't trying to take anything from her, just trying to understand. The comfortable silences, the bad coffee, the calm. On the morning of the 13th day, she got out of bed, left her phone on the table without even checking her emails, and called her driver. Get the Vesper ready, and no security. Miss Grant, are you sure? I'm sure. I'm going alone this time. She grabbed the folder where she'd kept the draft of a contract, an informal sketch, something her lawyer hadn't even seen yet, but she knew, if she presented it to Jack the way she would to any executive, he'd say no. So it wouldn't be a contract. It would be an invitation. Back in Silver Ridge, Jack was up on the roof of the garage, cleaning the gutters and trying to ignore the growing restlessness he felt for no reason he could explain. Ever since Amelia left, he'd done his best to go back to his routine. But it was pointless. Nothing felt the same. The sound of that familiar engine echoing down the road made him stop cold. He climbed down from the roof, heart pounding, though his face tried to wear its usual calm expression. And then she appeared, once again driving that same black Vesper, only this time, with a different light in her eyes. Jack crossed his arms, leaning against the side of the garage as she stepped out of the car. I'm back, she said, like it hadn't been almost 2 weeks. I noticed, he replied, trying not to show how much it shook him. Car broke down again. Or you just missed the terrible coffee? She laughed. Neither. But I'll take the coffee if it's still on offer. They went inside. Jack poured 2 cups, and she waited in silence, watching everything like she was coming home. It was strange how familiar that place felt now. So, what brings you here? He finally asked. She pulled a leather envelope from her bag and placed it on the table. Before you assume that's a contract, it's not. Jack raised an eyebrow, but didn't open it. What is it then? It's an idea. She took a deep breath. I want to build something. From scratch. Something outside the corporate circus. A space for restoration and automotive innovation, but with soul. With purpose. I want it to carry your name, and I want you to run it. Jack went silent. She continued. I know it sounds crazy, and maybe it is, but after I met you, I realized I need people like you around me. People who see value where no one else does, who can't be bought, who say no when everyone else is too afraid to. You want to build a garage? He asked, genuinely confused. Here? Not exactly here, but close enough to still feel real. And you want me to run it? No, I want you to be it. To pour your soul into it. The way you do with every car you touch. The investment is mine. The heart of it, that's yours. Jack looked at the envelope. Still unopened. Why? Why me? Amelia stepped closer, her eyes locked onto his. Because you were the only person who saw me without knowing who I was, and still really saw me, and because I trust you more than I've trusted any suit sitting across from me in years. Jack took a deep breath. His heart beat faster, but it wasn't fear. It felt more like hope. This all sounds way too big for me. Maybe it is, she smiled. But I've learned the best things in life are the ones that scare you a little. Jack looked at the envelope again. Not because of the terms, but because, in that moment, what was on the line was far more than paper and ink. It was trust. It was emotion. It was her. And he still wasn't sure what to say. But he knew what he felt was real. The envelope sat on the shop table like it had its own gravity. Not just physical, but emotional. Like it carried all the possibilities Jack had spent his whole life avoiding. After Amelia left that afternoon, with the promise not to pressure him for an answer, Jack was left alone with his thoughts, and they were far too loud for someone who was used to silence. He locked up the garage, made a pot of coffee far too strong, and sat on the worn-out couch in the back room. The radio played some soft folk tune, but he barely heard it. His mind was miles away. He opened the envelope carefully. Inside was more than he expected. Sketches of a modern space, a partnership proposal with fair profit sharing, total creative freedom, and a handwritten note in delicate script. I don't want to change you, Jack. I just want to build something real with someone real. Think about it, Amelia. Jack rested the note on his leg and stared at the ceiling. He had dreamed of having his own space, a garage with his name on it, his rules, a place to teach, to build, to restore. But he'd always figured it was just that, a dream, something that happened to other people, in other towns. But now, it was right in front of him, literally. He thought of his mother, how she always told him he was more than he believed, how she taught him to do good without expecting anything in return. He thought of his father, who taught him how to fix engines, but more importantly, how to listen. He thought of Silver Ridge, the calm, the familiar faces, the quiet comfort of routine. And then he thought of her, Amelia, not the billionaire CEO, but the woman who sat next to him on the garage steps, who laughed at his terrible coffee and stayed quiet when he needed silence. The woman who, despite coming from a completely different world, somehow spoke the same language as him. But was that enough? Jack stood and stepped outside, where the Silver Ridge sky stretched above him like an ocean of stars. There, sitting on the hood of an old car, he stared into the night and spoke like she could somehow hear him. "What if I mess it all up?" he asked the wind. But the wind didn't answer. Instead, he remembered what Amelia had said. The best things in life are the ones that scare you a little. And for the first time, Jack realized maybe fear wasn't a warning. Maybe it was a sign that something important was about to begin. He didn't know everything. He wasn't certain of anything. But maybe it was time to take a step. Not because of the garage, not because of the opportunity, but because of her, and because of everything he could be, if he had the courage to try. The sun had barely risen over Silver Ridge when Jack woke up, fully alert, like his body had already made the decision for him. No alarm, no doubts, just a quiet certainty, and the urge to move. He threw on his worn denim jacket, grabbed the envelope with Amelia's sketches, and looked around the old garage one last time, still wrapped in morning shadows. Then he took a deep breath, picked up his phone, and dialed. In Denver, Amelia Grant sat in her high-rise, staring out the floor-to-ceiling window with an untouched cup of tea in her hand. Her eyes fixed on the city below, but her mind was somewhere else entirely. Silver Ridge. When the phone rang and she saw his name light up on the screen, Jack Walker, her heart skipped a beat. She answered without hesitation. "Jack?" "Morning, Amelia." She smiled without even realizing it. "I thought you weren't gonna call." "So did I," he answered. Honest. There was a brief silence. Not awkward, but thick, like they were both bracing themselves for something big. "So?" she asked, trying to keep her voice steady. "Did you read what I left?" "I did, and I've thought about it a lot." She held her breath. "And? I'm in." Silence. "You're in for what exactly?" Jack smiled on the other end of the line. "The garage, the project, working with you, starting something new. Whatever all of this is, I'm in, as long as it's real." Amelia closed her eyes, relief washing over her. "It's real, Jack. More than anything I've ever done." "Then tell me something," he went on. "When do I start?" "Now." "Now?" "I'm heading to Silver Ridge, leaving in half an hour. I want us to see the land together. I want you to pick the spot. That garage is going to be just as much yours as it is mine." Jack chuckled. "So you're not the waiting type, not when it's about something that matters. And you think this matters?" "Jack," her voice softened, "if I could choose anyone in the world to start something from scratch with, something built on purpose, trust, and soul, I'd still choose you." Jack swallowed hard. He wasn't the kind of man used to hearing big words, but coming from her, they didn't feel like too much. "Then hurry up," he said with a lighter tone. "I've got some terrible coffee waiting for you." She laughed. "Perfect. That's exactly how I like to start impossible projects." Hours later, back in Silver Ridge, Jack stood at the edge of town, leaning against his old blue pickup, when the black Vesper appeared at the end of the road, cutting through the dust like a ribbon of elegance on wheels. The car stopped, and before Amelia even stepped out, Jack was already smiling. She got out, wearing jeans and a light blouse, her face free of the usual makeup. Her hair was tied back casually, and still, she looked more genuine than in any magazine photo. They stood facing each other for a moment, silent. Then she said, "There's still time to back out, you know." Jack shook his head, eyes locked with hers. "I've spent too much time backing out of life. Now I want to see how far I can go. With you." Amelia took a deep breath. The emotion was right there, just beneath the surface. "Then let's build something together, Jack. Something neither of us ever has to hide." He held out his hand. She took it. And for the first time, not as a CEO and a mechanic, but as two hearts betting everything on a chance to build something that couldn't be bought. The dirt road that cut through the outskirts of Silver Ridge led to a wide, half-forgotten piece of land, where tall weeds covered the ground and the sky looked bigger than anywhere else. Jack looked around, hands in his pockets, while Amelia walked beside him. They stayed quiet for a few minutes. "Here?" she asked, looking toward the horizon. "What do you think?" Jack walked to the center of the land. The sound of his boots crushing the dry grass was the only noise around. "It's high enough to catch the sunset," he said. "There's space, it's remote, and no neighbors to complain about engine noise." Amelia smiled. "I brought the revised plans. The architect can tweak whatever you need. As long as it doesn't look like some fancy clinic, I'm good," he joked. "I want people to feel like they can walk in with muddy boots and all." She laughed, pulling up the most recent sketches on her tablet. "I made sure of that. A real garage with soul, but equipped with the best tools. Modern gear, a full restoration bay, space for classes, and a break room with terrible coffee, of course." Jack looked at her sideways. "That a running joke now?" "Nope. It's part of the brand identity," she said, winking. They spent the rest of the morning walking across the land, dreaming big and putting on paper ideas that used to feel way too far off. Jack would suggest technical tweaks. She'd think about the client experience. It was like two different halves finally building something whole. By the end of the day, they sat on the back of Jack's pickup, legs dangling, eyes on the orange-streaked sky. "You know what's weird?" he said, not looking directly at her. "What?" "All of this. It doesn't feel forced. I thought I'd feel out of place, but I feel at home." Amelia stayed quiet for a moment. "Me too." Jack turned his face to her. "You've had everything all your life. Why does this project matter so much to you?" She stared at the horizon, like she was picking her words carefully. "Because building something with someone you respect, it's different than just paying someone to do it. Because I've spent years surrounded by people who say yes for the wrong reasons. And you didn't even want to know my name. And now I want you to say yes because you believe in it, not because I own the land." Jack looked at her. Her eyes, free of makeup, said more than any boardroom speech ever could. In that moment, he saw the woman, not the brand, and something more stirred between them. More than partnership, more than a project. "Then here's my yes," he said, "but on one condition." "What is it?" "No 7 a.m. meetings. I work better after 2 coffees and 20 minutes of silence." She laughed, throwing her head back. "Deal." And right there, on that dusty patch of land beneath the open sky, 2 lives started to intertwine. Not through contracts or business interests, but through trust, respect, and something growing slowly, like all things meant to last. The first weeks of building the new garage were intense. Trucks hauled in supplies up and down the narrow roads of Silver Ridge, stirring up dust and plenty of curiosity from the locals. No one quite understood what was happening on that once empty land, only that Jack Walker, the town's mechanic, was now walking around with a clipboard, and a woman from Denver by his side. But what everyone saw from the outside was just a fraction of what was really being built there. Amelia followed every detail, from the leveling of the ground to the choice of paint on the walls. She didn't delegate a thing. More than that, she listened. Every suggestion from Jack, no matter how simple, was considered carefully. It was rare to see someone like her, someone used to sitting at the top, so present in something so grounded. And Jack? He was blooming, like he'd finally been given permission to dream big without losing his footing. "The restoration room needs more windows," he said one day, eyeing the steel frame taking shape. "Because of the natural light?" Amelia asked. "That too, but mostly because I don't want to work on amazing cars inside a box. They deserve to see the world, even while standing still. She jotted it down without a second thought. Done. You don't want to run that by your architect first? Jack, I brought you in to be the soul of this place, and a soul needs light. He looked at her, caught off guard by the answer, and something in his chest tugged just a little. Days later, on a random late afternoon, the crew had already left. The skeleton of the building was starting to take on a more defined shape. Jack and Amelia were sitting on stacked cement bags, covered in dust and paint. She took a sip of water, let out a sigh, and looked down at her hands. I used to think buildings were made of concrete and calculations, she said thoughtfully. But now I see they're made of patience and care. Jack chuckled. And a bit of improvising, too. Like that pipe the crew drilled through today. True, she smiled. But there's also something else happening here. Something you can't put on a blueprint or a budget. Jack turned to look at her. Her eyes were softer now, more open. Like what? Like, whatever it is we're building. And I'm not just talking about the garage. Jack stayed quiet. His heart picked up its pace. He knew exactly what she meant. He'd felt it in the gestures, in the looks exchanged when neither of them wanted to admit what was really happening beneath all those layers of plans and concrete. I know, he finally said, voice lower. I feel it too. She looked away, maybe surprised he'd said it out loud. But in that moment, no declaration was needed. The silence between them said everything. That's when Rick, the local helper, showed up holding 2 pizzas. Brought back up, he said with a wide grin. Looks like the couple's been working late again. Jack raised an eyebrow. Couple? Rick laughed. Oh, come on. The whole town's already figured it out. You two are just the last to admit it. Amelia laughed, cheeks turning the faintest shade of pink. Jack didn't say a word. He just took a slice of pizza, handed another to her, and turned his gaze back to the glowing structure of the future garage, bathed in the soft light of the setting sun. Something big was rising there, brick by brick, but what was growing the most was invisible. And it was already far beyond anything any blueprint could predict. There were just 2 weeks left until the garage's grand opening. The walls were up. The sign, Walker and Grant Customs, was ready to be installed. Tools were arriving. The local mechanics, trained by Jack, took turns testing out the equipment. And for the first time, the lights inside the new building lit up the night. It was the kind of dream Jack had never thought he'd live. And yet, there was something he feared more than any blown engine, losing control of what he was feeling. Amelia was getting closer to him by the day. Not physically. She'd been in his space since that first terrible coffee, but emotionally. Now she touched his arm without noticing, laughed at his dry jokes more easily, and sometimes she watched him in silence for long seconds, as if trying to memorize every detail before reality came calling again. That night, they were alone once again, sitting on the floor of the freshly painted reception area, eating Chinese food from paper containers. Amelia was observing the details of the light fixtures. Jack was observing her. You know, she said, playing with her chopsticks, after the grand opening, everything's going to change. How so? The press will find out. The investors will start asking questions. The world I left behind is going to want to know what I'm doing here. Jack stayed quiet. And what are you going to say? He asked, not taking his eyes off her. She hesitated. That I found a new kind of investment, a place where values still mean something. And about me? She looked at him, surprised by the direct question. Jack continued, his voice lower. Are you going to say I'm your business partner? A project associate? Or are you going to hide the rest? Amelia took a deep breath. It's not simple, Jack. It really isn't, he replied. But hiding what we feel, that never ends well. She closed her eyes for a moment. Her heart was racing. I'm not afraid of you. I'm just afraid of everything I might lose. Jack stepped closer, his gaze steady. Then tell me, what do you really want? She stayed silent. Look at me, Amelia. Not as a CEO, not as the woman who can finance the whole world. Just as you. What do you want? It took her a while to answer, but when she did, the words came out almost like a whisper. I want you. Jack didn't move. He didn't smile. He just felt each word echo inside him like a silent bolt of lightning. "Then stop running," he said, "because I'm not going to chase someone who's always looking over her shoulder." Amelia stepped closer, slowly. "You don't need to chase," she murmured, "because I'm staying." And in that moment, without another word, she rested her forehead against his. It was like all the walls crumbled at once. Jack held her face in both hands, firm, steady, and finally kissed her. It wasn't rushed. It wasn't uncertain. It was the quiet confirmation of everything that had been growing between them. Of everything no contract, no brick, no blueprint could ever predict. When the kiss ended, they remained close, still breathing together. "This changes everything," she said, smiling. "No," he replied. "It just makes everything more real." The next morning after the kiss, the one that seemed to seal everything that had, until then, been silence and suggestion, Jack woke up earlier than usual. Not from anxiety, but from purpose. The garage was almost ready, and he wanted to adjust the final details before the mechanics and suppliers arrived. Amelia was still asleep in the small guest house beside the property. For the first time in a long while, she looked peaceful. But peace for her was always something brief. At 9:20 a.m., her phone rang insistently. She looked at the screen. Charles Bennett, vice president of the Grant Motors board, the most influential man in the company, after her. She hesitated. She answered. "Charles, Amelia, we need to talk. Urgently." "Now?" "Now." 30 minutes later, she was on a video call with the executive board. All the faces were serious, crisp shirts, modern office backdrops behind them. "We're concerned," Charles began. "Your absence from strategic meetings, your involvement in a side project, and now, rumors of a relationship with a small-town mechanic?" Amelia froze. "Are you questioning me as a CEO or as a woman?" "We're questioning the image of the company," another board member replied. "Grant Motors has always stood for excellence, focus, and innovation. What you're doing feels like you're running away." Amelia took a deep breath. "What I'm doing is creating something with soul, a project that honors the company's roots. My father started in a garage. Being in one now isn't running away. It's going back to where it all began. But with a romantic involvement," Charles pressed, "you know how the market reacts to that. Jack isn't a distraction. He's part of this. And if that relationship affects decisions, what if he makes a mistake? Will you protect him out of affection?" Those words stung. But more than that, they reminded her of everything she'd already faced just to be taken seriously. At that moment, she had two options: to back down, as she'd done before, or finally stand in her truth. She chose the second. "I spent years proving I'm more than the name Grant. Now, if I have to prove I can love someone without losing my leadership, maybe the problem isn't me. Maybe it's the system you all are still defending." Silence. One by one, the faces quieted. Charles just stared at her with a look of warning. "The media's going to jump on this. You know that. Let them. I'm no longer interested in maintaining a spotless image at the cost of an empty life." And with that, she ended the call. At the garage, Jack was finishing the assembly of a compressor when she arrived, still wearing the blazer she used for meetings, even out here in the countryside. He noticed the tension before she said a word. "They called, didn't they?" "They did," she said, walking closer. "They're pressuring you?" "They're trying to make me choose." "And what did you say?" Amelia looked at him with a steadiness that mixed nerves and certainty. "I told them they could sit and wait, because I chose you." Jack didn't say a word. He just stepped closer and pulled her into a hug. Tight, long, real. There, in the middle of the construction dust, with the sound of tools and the smell of fresh paint, she felt that she had finally chosen something. That mattered. "They're going to make this hard," she said, her head resting on his shoulder. "Let them. I'm not the type to back down easy." "I know." And in that moment, the garage wasn't just a project anymore. It was a fortress, and what they had between them, something no boardroom, no contract, no rumor could break. Only 24 hours remained until the grand opening of Walker & Grant Customs. And Silver Ridge, that sleepy little town that barely knew what it meant to make the news, was now at the center of attention. Reporters had started arriving with their cameras. Drones buzzed overhead. The buzz was loud and clear. Grant Motors' heiress gives it all up to open garage with unknown mechanic. Jack tried to keep his focus on the final touches, double-checking the tools, testing the hydraulic lifts, adjusting the signage. But even with his hands busy, his mind was racing. He never wanted attention, never asked for the spotlight. And now, he was right in the middle of it. Outside, townspeople gathered at the makeshift fence to watch. Some took photos, others whispered. There was curiosity, sure, but there was judgment too. In the late afternoon, as the sun bathed the freshly painted walls of the garage in gold, Jack stepped out for air. And there he found Carl, his oldest customer, standing across the street with his hands in his pockets. "Looks good," Carl said, with that typical tone of someone who doesn't say much, but always says enough. Jack shrugged, trying to hide the unease. "I don't know if the world's ready for this. Are you?" Jack looked at him. "Honestly, I don't know. I just wanted to fix cars, not make headlines." Carl gave a crooked grin. "Son, sometimes the world needs more people who just want to fix what's broken, even if it's people." Jack fell silent, and in that moment, he saw Amelia stepping out of the garage, hair pulled back in a messy bun, a smear of white paint on her shirt sleeve. And still, more real than any CEO he'd ever seen on TV. She waved. He waved back. Later, at the guest house, Jack stepped inside quietly. Amelia was sitting on the porch, a blanket over her shoulders and a half-full glass of wine in her hand. "Tired?" he asked, walking closer. "A little. Mentally, more than physically. I can imagine." She sighed. "The press is going to try and tear this apart tomorrow. They'll say it's a PR stunt, that you're a gold digger, that I've lost my mind. Are you scared?" She looked at him with total honesty. "No, not anymore." "Then we're good," he said, sitting down beside her. She rested her head on his shoulder. "I spent so much time trying to prove I was strong. I forgot how good it feels to be vulnerable with someone I trust." Jack squeezed her hand. "You're going to hear a lot of noise, but I'll be here, to remind you who you are. And if this all falls apart," Jack smiled, eyes on the star-filled sky, "then we fix it, like every broken car that's ever come through my shop." She laughed, and for a moment, the sound of cameras, the gossip, the nervous executives, all disappeared. Only the two of them remained, two people who had bet on the improbable. And they were about to prove that when something is built with truth, no one can tear it down. The sun was still climbing when the first cars began to arrive. The little street leading to Walker and Grant Customs turned into something Silver Ridge had never seen before. Restored classic models were lined up for display. News crews set up tripods. Automotive influencers were live streaming on their phones. And the townspeople, proud and curious, filled the sidewalks with phones in hand. Jack wore his best shirt, dark denim, clean, buttoned to the collar, but still the same worn-out boots, because he knew he needed to stay himself. Amelia arrived minutes later, driving the black Vesper like she had the first time. But now, it was different. She was no longer a lost woman. She was a woman with purpose. She wore a leather jacket over a white blouse and dark pants. Elegant but approachable, powerful but real. She stopped in front of the garage and looked up at the glowing sign, Walker and Grant Customs. Her last name came second, and that said everything. Jack walked up, and she smiled. "Ready?" he asked. She took a deep breath. "Only if you are." Before either of them could say more, Charles Bennett appeared from the crowd. Beside him, two Grant Motors executives, their faces stern, eyes scanning, judging. Amelia didn't flinch. She'd been expecting this. "Amelia," said Charles, "you can still end this, before it becomes an international headline." She smiled. "It already is. Now the only question is what story we're going to tell." Jack watched closely but said nothing. Charles crossed his arms. "The floor is yours." Amelia stepped up the entry steps, stopping in front of the makeshift mic. Cameras turned. Phones went up. And then she spoke. "When I was a kid, my father taught me two things: how to fix engines, and never to lie about who you are." She glanced at Jack for a moment. "For years, I built an image, impeccable, polished and lonely. I distanced myself from anything that had soul, just to fit into a mold others expected of me. Until one day, my car broke down on the side of a road, and I met someone who reminded me what it meant to trust without contracts, help without expecting anything back, and love without having to hide. A quiet ripple moved through the crowd. Yes, I'm here today as CEO of Grant Motors, but I'm also here as a woman who chose to stop hiding. The project you see here, it's not a whim. It's a bridge between the past and the future, between the person I was forced to be and the one I truly am. She reached out her hand to Jack. He stepped up and took it without hesitation. This is Jack Walker, and he is my business partner, my partner. And yes, the person I chose to love, even if the whole world says it doesn't make sense. Silence. And then, applause. It started soft, from the townsfolk, the mechanics, the onlookers. But soon, it spread. Even the journalists, used to scandal, stood to their feet. Jack turned to her. That was brave. That was real, she said, her eyes glistening. For the first time, I didn't speak as a CEO. I spoke as me. He pulled her into a hug, tight, beneath the camera flashes. Right there, in the middle of it all, they stood together. No hiding, no labels, just two hearts that had chosen to build something and defend it. The grand opening of Walker and Grant Customs was a success beyond anyone's expectations. What started as a garage bridging two worlds had become a headline, an inspiration, and most importantly, a home. The weeks that followed were a whirlwind of hard work, learning, and something new blooming between Jack and Amelia, now without walls, without secrets. The critics came, of course. Online haters, opinion columns questioning the legitimacy of the project, voices claiming she had thrown everything away for a regular guy. But Amelia? She'd spent too long trying to please critics. And Jack? He knew the only validation that mattered was the one in the mirror, and in her eyes. One late afternoon, weeks after the opening, the official sign was finally installed. Metallic letters gleamed under the sun. Walker and Grant Customs. Restoration with soul. The two of them stood in front of the building, hand in hand. You know, Jack said, looking up at the name, I never thought my last name would ever be up there next to a billionaire's. Amelia smiled. And I never thought my last name would mean anything more than profit. Until now. They stood in silence for a moment. The shop was closed that day, not because they had to, but because they chose to. What comes next? She asked. Jack looked at her softly. Now comes the hard part. What's that? Living it, every day, with patience, with truth. No running, no hiding. She nodded. I'm ready for that. He pulled her close, resting his forehead against hers. And if this place ever breaks down someday, he whispered, we fix it. She laughed, tears stinging her eyes. Do you always have the perfect answer, mechanic? No, but I know where to look. They kissed. No cameras, no crowd, no fear, just the two of them. That night, sitting on the hood of a classic car Jack had rebuilt with his own hands, they looked up at the Silver Ridge sky, now part of both their stories. The garage was there, the future too. And the love they built? It was the kind that can't be bought, can't be planned, but can be cared for. Like an old engine with a lot of miles still left to run.